And we've been getting some, so you've got two questions, and please keep the questions coming. China, and my friend Walter Colton, my friend William Holstein have been asking the panelists, where do you see the role of China? And I was asked on a TV news show, and I said, well, you know, China is the largest trading partner of Ukraine, but it's a lot more sophisticated than that. And that is interesting that China has displaced Russia in the last 8 years as the largest trading partner of Ukraine. Russia's tumbled down to third place behind either Germany or Poland, depending on if they're measuring imports or exports. Peter, Myroslava, what do you see the role of China in days ahead? And they're treading a very fine line, but and one question says, will China tell Russia not to move out of the areas it controls in eastern Ukraine? I leave that to you.
Well, China in previous crises has been exceptionally critical of any sort of violation of sovereign borders agreed upon by international law. Obviously, you know, China's stance has been very legalistic in these matters, but whether or not we will see an extrapolation of that, given everything that's going on. I mean, obviously, everybody has their eyes on Taiwan and what's going to happen there, and whether China will mirror Russia's expansionist stance. In the case of the Naples blockade, we might actually see, I think, a new type of hybrid warfare, where it's not so much a traditional blockade as a disruption to Ukraine's trade flow going in and out. Obviously, why that is significant is because of the many agreements that Ukraine has signed with countries, including China, taking on the responsibility of supplying things like grain and I mean other exports, not only agricultural but some industrial as well. So if Ukraine is unable to meet the clauses of the many trade contracts that she signed, Ukraine will have to, will most likely face consequences, both short-term and long-term disruption to the economic ties that Ukraine has successfully built over the years. Worryingly, though, we have seen in the metrics that Russia remains an important trade partner for Ukraine. There is, and I mean, Jim, you might be able to comment better on that, but there is an enormous volume of trade going on with Russia. I mean, in the tens of billions of dollars, I believe, annually, which is ongoing despite the war and despite the current crisis. I mean, in culture, we have seen that polemic with Ukrainian artists, whether secretly or openly, performing in the Crimea, illegally annexed by Russia in 2014. And of course, Russia proper. Russia remains one of the main consumers of Ukrainian cultural exports. Mm-hmm. And we see that, we see the most curious cases. Like there is a really famous pastry chef called Alexander Seleznyov, who is based in Monaco. And I think he represents that generation of Russians who prefer to spend their time outside of Russia, but who is kind of very culturally Russian. And he talks about how he comes back from his pastry shop every day, and he kicks back for 2 hours watching Ukrainian series. And I mean, that's something very new. The fact that Ukraine has now produced enough kind of trash TV to ensnare Russian viewers shows that Ukraine is doing something right. Yeah. Whether or not, again, that emphasizes that Ukraine is a sovereign state, will choose to remain independent and will fight to the death for her land and her people. That remains to be seen. I don't think Russia is really getting that message. And I think a lot of the debates, and this is, Jim, something that you mentioned in your talk recently, we don't actually know how good the information that Putin is getting is, whether his yes men are suggesting that Ukrainians are waiting to welcome Russian tanks with flowers, with floral garlands. That's something that is worrying, whether he actually overestimates how much the Ukrainian people are longing to be liberated, Peter, in terms of what you said about Zelensky now becoming more patriotic, I don't think that he wasn't patriotic. I just think that the modality of the expression of patriotism has changed. You know, I think he wanted to kind of mark a change from Poroshenko when it was kind of overtly militaristic and perhaps nationalistic, towards a kind of calmer, more kind of, I'd say, muted and less overtly religious and rhetorical kind of expression. But yeah, the fact that he's doing it now in this crisis, we have seen that change. And I think, you know, one way that I've tried to illustrate that change is the slide kind of contrasting, you know, official art circa 2000, you know, Ukraine on a massive column with a, you know, Corinthian golden column, and sort of the more kind of steampunk, yes, this is Ukraine, we have suffered, but we're still kind of, you know, partying. Yeah, now is certainly not the time to party, and now is probably the right time for Zelensky to choose to be kind of more overtly patriotic in his speech.
Yeah.
But he's not overdone it.
Yeah, no, I agree. That statue of the column could have been raised in 1918, the first Ukrainian republic.